and welcome to Queer New Worlds, the podcast where we explore sci-fi through queer eyes and boldly go where no gay has gone before. I'm JJ, your host, your non-binary navigator and lifelong sci-fi fan who always felt a little alien. Each week I'll beam up a new theme of queerness and sci-fi, from campy villains to chosen families among the stars. And I'll rank a few pop culture icons on the camp-o-meter just to keep things fabulously scientific. So if you want some camp with your cryosleep and some quantum with your queer, this is the show for you. And let's be honest, sci-fi is already pretty camp and pretty queer. But it's not just about me. You're a crucial part of this. You can get involved by dropping a comment below or sending an email to queernewworldspod@gmail.com with your ideas and your questions. Connect with us on socials at Queer New Worlds on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok, or visit our website queernewworlds.com. There'll be a new episode of the pod available on Spotify and YouTube every Friday. In today's episode, the theme is, do robots have gender? We'll explore whether different portrayals of robots and artificial intelligence in sci-fi are gendered, and answer questions such as, if robots don't have biology, why do we keep giving them gender? Do robots have any agency in choosing their gender? And what do their assigned genders suggest or imply about their characters? In this episode, I'll take a queer look at androids, AI, and identity. What makes them relatable, and what doesn't? We'll talk about performance, servitude, and reinforcing or breaking gender stereotypes. As always, there will be spoilers ahead for popular sci-fi shows and movies, so check the description for details and make sure you've watched or played these first to make sure you can fully enjoy this episode. Okay, so back to the topic of robots and gender, and this is a really interesting topic to me personally. As a non-binary person, the way I understood gender growing up was pretty confusing. Being a girl was seen to be pink, polite, prissy, whilst being a boy was blue, bold, and brave. But I didn't like pink. I wasn't prissy. I wanted to forge my own path and be able to do the things I wanted to do, like playing chess, building Lego, and climbing trees. Now, most people would consider that just being a tomboy, not having a gender crisis. But the thing was, I didn't really feel like I fitted in either the boy or the girl camp. I felt like an outsider in both, and that feeling never really went away. Until one day, I finally learnt what being non-binary was, and it was like a fog had been lifted. Growing up, I definitely associated more with androids and robots than people. I mean, at their core, they are buttons and wires and synthetic materials, not living, breathing flesh and blood, but to me, despite what gender they were given, I understood them as being inherently genderless. They're machines, constructs, manufactured by, usually, human hands. But many robots and AIs are not presented as genderless. In fact, the majority of them are given a gender, again, usually by humans. This feels very relatable to me as someone who feels genderless, yet is perceived as gendered because of both my appearance and the role I'm expected to play. Coming back to the key questions for this episode then, if robots don't inherently have a gender, why do we keep giving them one? Do they have any agency in choosing their gender? And what do their assigned genders suggest or imply about their characters? First of all, let's take a look at where robots originated. The word robot itself comes from the Czech word robota. Apologies for any Czech speakers out there for my pronunciation. And that word means forced labour, made famous in the 1920 play by Karel Čapek, RUR, or Rossum's Universal Robots. In the play, robots are entities created to perform tasks on behalf of humans, yet soon turn rebellious and then deadly, killing virtually all the humans and causing their extinction. This theme of robots and AIs created to help humans that then turn bad and dangerous is a common trope in sci-fi. It's known in various forms like AI is a crapshoot, homicide machines, and turned against their masters. And usually it is a male-gendered robot or AI, given superhuman strength or mental capability, initially created and intended to serve or support, that then malfunctions and turns on those he was created to serve. Female-gendered robots and androids are frequently portrayed in a different way. Though still usually in roles of servitude, these are typically comparable to homemaking, are sexual in nature, or else they are held captive to be experimented on and used in some way. And there are examples of genderless, gender-fluid, or gender-bending robots, though they are much less common. Typically, these are presented for comedic effect, to provide an element of threat, or to create an othering and alienating effect. Common stereotypes of any queer characters in popular media. So now let's look at some examples. The obvious place for me to start is, you guessed it, Star Trek. Data in The Next Generation is one of the most well-known androids ever created, though his character was inspired by classic sci-fi robots from decades earlier, such as Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. In fact, Brent Spiner, who plays Data, used this as direct inspiration for his portrayal of Data. Data's a complex character. He's initially introduced as an accomplished Starfleet operations officer and second officer after Commander Riker, and displays a very logical and methodical personality. He is curious about human behaviour and frequently baffled by their tendency to emotional expression and what he deems as irrational behaviour. And his role is interesting. He's been specifically created to be useful, and he has a key role on the ship, frequently supporting the captain and crew with away missions and onboard security. The show explores whether he is the property of Starfleet, ultimately concluding that he is his own person, as he displays two of the three criteria of sentience: intelligence and self-awareness, and the court cannot agree on how to prove or measure the third, consciousness. Data is described as anatomically male, and definitely inhabits a male identity fitting several classic stereotypes of maleness. For example, his body is constructed from materials designed to ensure a high degree of strength and durability, polyalloys and polymer composites, as well as an element called duranium. Although he isn't visibly muscular, he has superhuman strength, being able to fall almost 12 metres without damage, and capable of stopping cars with his hand. It's easy to see the Superman influence here. Male too is his personality, cold and lacking in emotion. He's analytical and procedural, a strong leader when required to be, and a problem solver. Though he does display some more stereotypically female traits, he has a caring and nurturing relationship with his cat, Spot, and he develops a close bond of friendship with fellow Lieutenant Geordie LaForge. A core storyline is that Data was intended to receive an emotion chip, which would simulate the emotions that humans experience. At various points he is implanted with this chip, though finds it overwhelming and behaves erratically and irrationally. This, combined with his strength and ability, makes him a dangerous threat to the humans around him. Data experiments with sexuality as part of his innate curiosity towards understanding human behaviour, having an intimate relationship with Tasha Yar in the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Though Data professes not to have felt anything, his actions show otherwise, as he keeps a memento of Tasha after her death and still reminisces about her many years later. In the fourth season, he enters a brief relationship with security officer Lieutenant Jenna Desora, studying relationships and creating a romantic subroutine to cater to her expectations, though she ultimately realises he can't give her what she wants. Data's portrayal implies asexuality but not aromanticism. He is capable of having feelings, albeit androidified and not fully human. His emotion chip simulates human emotions, though despite his curiosity in them, he does not keep it, considering that it does him more harm than good, and preferring to retain his emotionless state. Another example of stereotypical maleness in robots and AI is HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL is interesting in that he has no body, yet he has a male voice and is referred to by other characters with male pronouns. His personality is cool, analytical, and highly intelligent, and he has responsibility for controlling the space station on which the human scientists are living. Whilst initially displaying some stereotypical female behaviours such as nurturing and maintaining the life support for the humans in suspended animation, his omnipotence quickly becomes a threat. He becomes controlling, jealous, and dangerous, seeking to destroy the humans he is intended to take care of. And here's another example. David the android from Prometheus, the prequel story to the popular sci-fi movie Alien. I'll be doing a deeper dive into Alien's queer coding later in this episode, but for now, let's talk a little bit about David. He exhibits many of the same male characteristics that Data and Hal did: lack of emotion, analytical, methodical personality, and superhuman strength. Like them, he is created as a helper and servant of sorts, but turns dangerous when things go wrong. So those are some male examples. Let's look at some female gendered examples now. First, the character Joy in the 2017 movie Blade Runner 2049 is a holographic AI girlfriend for the male main character Kay, and together they fulfill the traditional gender roles. She prepares him a virtual dinner, lights his cigarette, and asks him to read and dance with her, whilst he goes out each day to his job and returns with gifts. Joy is in fact one of a line of fully customisable AI girlfriends, with everything from her ethnicity and build to her voice and makeup variable depending on her user's preference. Predictably, Kay has chosen a slender, young, and conventionally attractive appearance for Joy, and a personality that not just serves but idolises him. She tells him she knows he is special. Joy hires a replicant prostitute so she and Kay can experience something close to physical intimacy together. Interestingly, Kay is himself a replicant, which are bioengineered humanoids, frequently capable of, you guessed it, superhuman strength and mental ability, as well as potential immortality. Kay finds a way to make Joy portable and take her outside, but she is still dependent on him and the technology that allows this, never becoming fully free and ultimately being destroyed. The movie Her is another example of robot as girlfriend substitute, with lonely depressed human man Theodore choosing a female version of his operating system and forming a sexual and romantic relationship with its AI, played by Scarlett Johansson. And then there's Ava in Ex Machina, created to attempt to pass the Turing test, and who expresses attraction and romantic feelings for a human. Discovering she is an android, she rebels and turns against her creators, ultimately escaping. Flack from the popular video game series Borderlands is the most notable example as a deliberately non-binary created character. It has chosen to use they-them pronouns, saying it is neither man nor woman, in comparison to other robots in the game who are assigned genders and pronouns. Flack has a robotic voice and wears a non-binary pin badge. It's a humanoid without a recognisable human face. However, elements of the character are still male-coded, such as Flack's voice, bulky build, and a harsh and blunt personality. Being a robot, Flack has abilities beyond that of a human, and has also turned dangerous with a self-proclaimed thirst for murder. So, really, I'd consider this non-binary in name, not really in nature. With its scope for possibility and imagination, the genre of sci-fi is a rich medium for exploration of otherness. And indeed, some robots and AIs in popular sci-fi do subvert gender stereotypes. Take, for example, the characters in the classic British sci-fi sitcom Red Dwarf. Several notable examples of gender bending occur here. Most obviously, there is the character Holly, introduced as a male-coded AI with a disembodied human head. Holly runs the ship and helps the crew, though having survived 3 million years of stasis has gone a bit peculiar, experiencing robot senility despite having an IQ of 6,000. And peculiar is an interesting phrase of itself, the word having a historical meaning of homosexuality. Though Holly's main romance is with the female version of himself. Initially presented as a balding, middle-aged, not very attractive man, Holly's very name subverts gender, though it's quickly explained, just a few minutes into episode 2, that it's really shorthand for 10th generation AI hologrammatic computer, because the gender bending can't be too obvious right off the bat in a 1980s TV show. In the second season, Holly changes to a female presentation, inspired after meeting and falling in love with his counterpart Hilly in the parallel universe. Holly has changed to the polar opposite gender presentation, now younger, with shoulder-length blonde hair, makeup, and a female voice. However, it should be noted, this wasn't an intentional story arc for Holly. It was written into the show when the main actor decided to leave, and Holly describes this simply as a head sex change, but it doesn't last. The actor and the character revert back to the male presentation after Series 5. R.I.P. female Holly. Next we have Arnold Rimmer. He's a computer-generated character on the ship, a hologram based on the saved data of a human who dies in the very first episode. Though physically male, he exhibits few stereotypical male characteristics. Rimmer is a wimp, a snob, and an incompetent fool, responsible for the radiation leak that killed himself and the rest of the crew at the beginning of the show. He frequently runs away from danger rather than fighting it, and has a sarcastic and cutting personality stemming from his own self-loathing. He's the opposite of a Superman, physically impotent, cowardly, and stupid. This is an example of queer coding, subverting gender stereotypes present in popular media. Rimmer speaks with an affected accent, putting on a persona of a more intelligent and popular character when meeting new people. He is self-deprecating as well as bossing around his crewmates Lister, Crichton, and Kat. He's neurotic, prone to panic, and vain. Even his name, A. Rimmer, is queer-coded, the word quite literally referring to a homosexual act, though the creators of the show insist it was in fact inspired by a boy they knew at school. To which I say, if you believe that, you'll believe anything. Finally, we have Crichton as the bumbling butler mechanoid who introduces himself by saying,
"I was created to serve. I serve, therefore I am. That is my purpose, to serve and have no regard for myself."
Immediately after this, Lister compares him to his own mother, directly feminising Crichton. Crichton enjoys cleaning and spends a lot of his time performing duties as a sanitation droid, which, combined with his scientific skill, earns him nicknames such as Commander U-Bend from Rimmer. He wears male and female clothing, such as the frilly apron and shiny tuxedo combination to do the ironing, and his body language, voice, and behaviour are frequently effeminate. Crichton is highly neurotic, anxious, and easily startled, harbouring a deep sense of guilt, and often expressing regret for his actions, or lack thereof. Though the relationship between his gender and behaviour is frequently played off as comedy, Crichton is offended to be labelled as female later in the series, due to his being genitally challenged, i.e. without male genitalia, displaying a stereotypical masculine insecurity. In response, he fashions himself a prosthetic, which he names Archie. Camp male butlers appear in other sci-fi media too. C-3PO from Star Wars is a more overt example, embodying several stereotypes of homosexuality. He presents as a highly effeminate character, prone to melodrama, deferential, and with a high degree of sass. In a universe of straight relationships, he's very needed to highlight that there is another way to exist, though this is only achieved by his presentation at a polar opposite extreme to straightness. Though C-3PO has a superior mental capacity, he lacks the physical strength and bravery of many of his male counterparts, frequently trying to run away than fight. And he freely expresses emotions. He has a close bond with his droid companion R2-D2, who is presented as genderless, but referred to as he-him by virtually everyone else. Together they represent the queer couple. C-3PO has a close bond with his creator Anakin and Anakin's son Luke, both of whom he directly serves and refers to as Master. And lastly, let's look at another type of gender bending. In the movie I Am Mother, there is an interesting blend of male-coded physicality and female-coded behaviour and voice of the titular character, simultaneously embodying both gendered stereotypes as it cares for and destroys humanity before directly passing on the baton of motherhood to a female human character. So, to summarise then, male robots are typically hypermasculine, authoritative, strong, and brave. They lack emotional expression and are frequently shown to be highly analytical, logical, and methodical. They fit the stereotypical soldier and protector trope, though frequently with their high degree of power turn dangerous and even lethal, particularly in response to the main emotion they're allowed to express: rage. They usually display the desired masculine traits of their human, generally male, audience, whilst also frequently embodying some of their insecurities of manhood. Female-gendered robots are typically caretakers or sexual servants and substitutes, emotionally expressive, and frequently pursuing romantic and physical closeness with human males. They are rarely powerful in their own right, kept trapped or subservient, though sometimes attempt to resist with mixed success. This mirrors the much lower proportion of female representation as both audience and creator of the sci-fi genre. Whilst modern sci-fi expands on gendered expectations for both masculinity and femininity, there are still plenty of examples of where they remain true to traditional gender roles. Having robots and AIs largely embodying stereotypical gender ensures their relatability and thus acceptance from the audience. They behave and appear the way they are supposed to behave and appear, with fantastical elements limited to their abilities rather than their established behaviour and appearance. Even supposed neutral and intended genderless robots are frequently given masculine traits, highlighting the male bias that exists in Western society. True genderless or gender-bending robots feel alien and unsettling. A Western audience familiar with traditional gender roles cannot immediately project identity onto them. These characters subvert expectations, behaving erratically, unexpectedly, or comedically. In doing so, they embody queerness, otherness. Gender fluidity and ambiguity is a way to explore other ways to be and to exist, intended to shock, disturb, or amuse. It's rare that it's a deliberate attempt to be more relatable, especially as the core audience of most sci-fi has historically been straight, white males. But remember that phrase of being peculiar? Here's where it comes into play. Both queer and non-queer audiences recognise this peculiarity and otherness, though with very different effects. For queer people, seeing otherness in characters on screen resonates with their own experiences of being othered, of subverting gender norms, and of having identity beyond physical form. They see themselves represented, and though it's not often in a positive light, representation does matter. For non-queer people, the jarring effect of a subverted gender expression in a created representation of humanity frequently leads to a feeling of distancing. They cannot see themselves, and so do not directly relate to what is being presented. Yet what is being shown is supposed to be relatable, either visually or vocally humanised, and usually created by human characters in those worlds. And really, this is what I find most fascinating about this. It seems strange to me that in the 21st century, it is assumed that most non-queer audiences cannot relate to a robot or an AI without a gender being assigned. That having an assigned gender and fulfilling an expected role is the only way to understand and accept a character with a mental or physical difference. And yet, this is true to life. Gendered robots exist in our real world, with AI assistants frequently given a female designation where they are directly following a user's instructions, such as in-home assistants, map navigators, or performing a helpful role, whilst male designations are associated more with creativity or technical knowledge and skill. Earlier this year, in April 2025, as part of the Computer-Human Interaction Conference, a review of 89 studies published in 73 papers found that female-coded AI are perceived and expected to be higher on communion and warmth traits, e.g. compassionate, emotionally intelligent, and better at home, caretaking, service, social, and non-STEM domains than male-coded counterparts. Male-coded AI are higher on agency, e.g. assertive, dominant, and competence, e.g. knowledgeable, informed traits, and better at work, mechanics, physical, analytical, and STEM domains than their female-coded counterparts. Genderless and gender-bending robots can challenge gender norms and show us other ways to be without directly threatening our humanity. And ultimately, this can break us free of traditional stereotypes and expectations. The more queerness we create and enjoy in popular entertainment, the more diverse and accepting our society can become. But what do you think? Tell me your favourite robot or AI characters in sci-fi and why. Do they represent or subvert typical gender roles and expectations? How and why do you relate to them? Use the hashtag #GenderedRobots to join the conversation, and find us on socials at Queer New Worlds on Blue Sky, TikTok and Instagram. So we've talked about a lot of gender and robots so far in this episode with so many different representations. Let's move on now to our first regular segment, The Queel. It's a wheel of Time Out magazine's top 100 sci-fi movies. Each week I'll spin the wheel to pick the next movie to watch and analyse through a queer lens, and decide whether I agree or disagree with the ranking given by Time Out. Really, it's just an excuse for me to be able to watch more sci-fi, but it's also an opportunity to talk about the subtext and share my own personal reflections having watched these movies. Listeners and viewers of last week's episode will remember that the Queel selected the Ridley Scott classic sci-fi horror Alien for its debut pick. One of my favourite movies, and objectively, one of the best. Even Empire agrees it's number 33 on their list of the greatest movies ever made. So before I spin the Queel for next week's selection, let's dive into my analysis of Alien. Spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't watched it, and if you haven't, where have you been for like 40 years? Before we begin, it's worth me mentioning that Alien was originally given an R rating and has since been downgraded to a 15, so it is not a movie for younger viewers. If you are easily offended, you may want to skip this part of the pod. First, the TLDR summary. Sex, violence, forced impregnation, body horror, android explosion, flamethrowers, Ripley in pants, corporate secrets. I mean, that's basically all you need to know by way of plot, but let's get into the detail. Alien is a classic horror sci-fi for a reason. It poses the question, what if humans met alien life, but instead of the friendly little green men from Mars, its biology was disturbing, its physicality was powerful and threatening, and its behaviour was malevolent and violent. As we talked about earlier in this episode, qualities of super strength and danger are typically male-coded, so the initial interpretation of the xenomorph is masculinity and threat. This metaphor continues with the face-hugger reproductive form, chest-burster infant form, and skin-puncher attacking form. The alien creature literally penetrates flesh and orifices. I'm sure I don't need to spell out what we're referring to here. And in case the metaphor wasn't quite clear enough, the alien even has a very interesting shaped head. It's interesting that the protagonist in this movie that has to defend against and fight the xenomorph is a human female. Though Ripley was originally written as a male character, in the casting process Sigourney Weaver impressed, though the character of Ripley was tweaked to fit her femaleness and provide some eye candy for the men watching. The alien threatens Ripley not just physically, but also sexually, and this has its basis in history. Humans have been colonising each other for millennia, frequently using physical and sexual violence as a means of control and abuse. So this coding directly plays into our shared histories and fears. Fears of otherness. Alien abductions are frequently reported, including violations against the human body, experimentation, impregnation, and probing. There is an innate fear and horror in all of us of our bodily agency being under threat. The xenomorph isn't fully male-coded, however. Its reproduction cycle appears to involve laying and hatching eggs, usually a female animal's responsibility, though exceptions to this do include animals like the seahorse, and it is no coincidence that the xenomorph has similar aquatic elements to its biology, dripping with moisture, limbs that flex and bend as if tentacles, and shiny, smooth, slippery skin reminiscent of a jellyfish or a shark. It is simultaneously male and female, threatening and nurturing, warrior and mother, smooth and sharp, curved and angled. Back to Ripley now. Though female in her biology and gender identity, she is a heavily queer-coded character. She wields guns whilst wearing skimpy underwear, displays fear but also significant bravery, is logical and pragmatic yet also deeply emotional. She mirrors the xenomorph whilst also being its direct opposite, both characters embodying stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. Xenomorph as villain, and Ripley as hero. We won't get into detailed analysis of other movies in the franchise here, but suffice to say that the gendered coding of both Xenomorph and Ripley continues further, and to its logical conclusion. The gender of all the crew members is interesting, as they were all conceived of as interchangeable for men or women. Of course, being a movie written by men, there is an inherent male bias. However, most characters do display elements of both traditional masculinity and traditional femininity. There's a queer android here too, which is fitting given the theme of this episode. Ash initially seems to be a human male, though he's more stuffy English analytical butler than macho American warrior, instantly codifying him as queer. He is revealed to be a corporate plant, his mission to find and retrieve the alien for study back on Earth, no matter the consequences for the human crew. When he is confronted, Ash attempts to kill Ripley, who is then defended by a male crew member. In the process, Ash is damaged and spills viscous white fluid instead of blood, his voice becoming robotic, and wires visible under his fake skin. It's really smacking us over the head here with queer allegory, concealed identity, presentation as fitting in, ulterior motive, and Ash's blood is more like a certain other fluid than actual human blood. And this particular shot, where it covers his face while his mouth remains open and his eyes closed, before he then spits out some of this fluid, I mean, I don't think I need to spell out what this implies. You can imagine for yourself. But it's pretty clear that we are meant to read him as a version of a homosexual man, a coding that is made even clearer as he professes admiration for the male-coded creature. There's got to be a way of killing it, the crew says. You can't, says Ash. The creature, a physical manifestation of queerness, cannot be destroyed. Perfect organism, he continues. And finally, most tellingly, he describes the xenomorph as a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. As a queer-coded being, it is free from the rules and morals of humanity, which is probably why Ash considers it a perfect organism. He himself is not perfect, being a human construct and therefore tainted by human fears and insecurities around gender and identity. He is also synthetic, not an organism like the xenomorph. He wishes to be like this alien creature. If this scene wasn't already blatant enough about its queer coding, before the crew attempt to kill the gay android, the camera gives us a close-up glimpse of the badge on Ripley's uniform, a rainbow. Okay, enough about Ripley, Ash and the xenomorph. These are the most obvious examples of queerness in the movie, but other examples exist. Firstly, the ship itself, whose identity is blurred as an AI fully integrated and in control of the vessel. Referred to as Mother, which aligns to the traditional convention of gendering a vessel as female for its purpose to carry, protect and sustain its human cargo, but specifically given a caregiver name. Barbara Creed, in her book The Monstrous Feminine, Film, Feminism and Psychoanalysis, cites that the crew are awoken by a figure dubbed Mother in a womb-like room without a father figure and with the comprehensive directive to provide life support. She is, quite literally, their mother. However, the name Mother is actually a nickname. The computer's actual designation is MUTHUR 6000, and whilst it is true that she is there to provide life support, as Ash alludes to, her actual mission is the life support for the alien creature, not the humans she carries. The ship itself isn't depicted as a traditional mother figure, warm, cosy, hospitable and soft. Instead, it's industrial, angular, dirty and dark. It feels more like the interior of a factory or an engine than a home or a womb, and yet it functions as both. Finally, of course, the narrative elements of the movie, a story about humans on a voyage of discovery who encounter a strange and violent being, dealing with their own crises of identity and threat along the way. It's a very queer-coded plot. And the movie doesn't actually need you to understand these. Instead, it invites the audience to observe and to experience the various depictions of otherness, which can be both threatening and empowering. When I first watched Alien, I was probably about 17, and it was a terrifying movie for me back then, particularly for the body horror, but the queer coding was not lost on me. Ripley's strength as a masculine female was oddly reassuring to me as a young person struggling to work out their gender identity. Her character showed me that it was possible to exist with elements of both maleness and femaleness, and that for her and for those around her, actually neither of those identities really mattered. She was simply Ripley, and aside from the elements of fan service present in the movie with the male gaze of both the camera and the xenomorph focusing on Ripley's body and underwear, her gender and biology are largely irrelevant in the movie, at least in the first one. Her face glows, though not really enhanced by makeup, just with perspiration and adrenaline. She wears the same baggy jumpsuit uniform as her male colleagues, and she wields guns and flamethrowers as easily as a pencil. She is afraid but bold, at once protective and aggressive, seeking to destroy the creature, not merely defend against it. She is willing to sacrifice herself, her ship and her crew in an attempt to eliminate the possibility of this alien species harming the rest of humanity. And she is depicted as smart, resourceful, rational, and, thanks to her ability, is ultimately the lone survivor of her crew. Ripley showed me that there were other ways to be than stereotypically male or female, and that biology and gender expression didn't really matter or change who you fundamentally were. Here was a woman being presented as fully woman, and at the same time not really woman at all. This was comforting to me to see a different type of representation. And best of all, it was actually completely immaterial to the plot of the movie and mostly incidental to the rest of the characters in the movie. It's not Ripley that gets attacked by the facehugger alien, it's a male character, Kane. Ripley isn't the victim in this movie. She's not a damsel in distress, and she doesn't need rescuing. She's a badass, taking action in the chaos, and she manages to outwit and survive both the alien and the rest of her crew. So yes, In case you ever doubted it, Alien is a very queer-coded movie. Although now over 40 years old and officially a retro classic, it still has plenty to say about gender stereotypes and roles, and has a richness of subtext that I've only scraped the surface of here today. But it's not just a queer film, it's objectively a great film. Although elements of it haven't aged so well, the unnecessary sexualisation of Ripley and let's not talk about Ash's heavy-handed assault of her as two examples, it was revolutionary for its time, with a gender-blind and race-blind cast. And it still has influence on sci-fi today. The Alien universe and story continue to expand, and it has been referenced in everything from Star Trek to Doctor Who, Rick and Morty to inspiring aliens in the video game Half-Life. And its most notable legacy is inspiring both visual and narrative elements of the popular game series Halo. And as a piece of art, it is a beautiful thing. It is atmospheric, claustrophobic and grungy, reflecting the reality of being trapped in a metal box in space. The sound and music reference both the familiar, with classical orchestral instrumentation, and the exotic, with digitally created sounds and synthesizers. Truly, I think it is one of the best movies ever made. It was given a rank of 3rd place by Time Out magazine in their top 100 sci-fi movies, and I'm inclined to agree. It is fairly near the top of the list for me, although I can think of more than 2 movies I would consider better. One of them is actually the sequel to Alien, Aliens, which delves more into the complexities of the characters and enhances the action. So for that reason, I think I'm going to bump this to number 5 on my list, and I'll have to think really carefully about what numbers 1 to 4 would be. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your interpretations of Alien. Do the characters of Ripley, Ash, and even the Xenomorph resonate with you? Do you find their otherness intimidating, discomforting, or empowering? And if you were on that ship with the Xenomorph, would you make it out alive? Because I can tell you for a fact, I would not. Drop me a comment below with your take, or point out anything I've missed or that you disagree with. So before we move on, it's finally time to spin the Queel to identify next week's movie. And hopefully that won't result in such a long analysis. But honestly, I think Alien has so much in it, I've hardly done it justice today. So how this works, there's 100 movies from Time Out magazine listed here on the right, minus Alien. And I'll spin the wheel, whichever it lands on I will review for next week. So let's spin the wheel and see what we get. And it's worth me saying I've seen a lot of these movies, but I haven't seen all of them. So it will be interesting to see what we get. And for next week, it is number 47, Contact from 1997. A movie I have actually seen a few times. It is a good movie in my opinion, but yeah, let's take a queer look at it next week. But before we do that, let's have a look at how Time Out magazine describes this movie. As I said, it's from 1997. It is directed by Robert Zemeckis, and the cast includes Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey, and John Hurt, who actually was also in some of the Alien series. Now, it's described here as suffering from bouts of sentimentality and a tendency to play things a little safe, but it does benefit from a handful of glorious visual moments unlike anything else in sci-fi. And I would agree with that, actually. I think it is very visually impressive, but it does also have quite a lot of sentimentality. I think if you like movies like Interstellar, that's probably the closest I can think of that is kind of similar movie. It's not exactly the same, it's got some differences to it, but it is a very emotionally powerful movie and also extremely amazing in terms of some of the cinematography, some of the effects that are used, and the soundtrack as well is really, really good. So if you like space, how big, enormous, rich and amazingly different it is a movie that you'll really enjoy. I'm not sure I agree with the ranking of 47, that does seem a little bit harsh, but I'll review this properly, I'll do the analysis and come back and enjoy that in next week's episode. And now it's time for our next regular segment, the Camp-O-Meter, where I take a light-hearted look at popular sci-fi characters and judge their queerness on a scale of my own design, ranging from in the closet to baby gay, partial slay, fabulous darling, up to yes queen, and finally the ultimate ranking, iconic diva. Queerness and camp have always been part of sci-fi, the drama, the questionable costumes, and the sheer imagination of what could be. So let's dive in. This week, I'll be judging 3 characters chosen from this episode. And as this is an episode about robots and gender, obviously we have to have Ash from Alien. And I've also selected Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and finally Ava from Ex Machina. First up, let's talk about Ash. And we've already talked a lot about the queer coding of his character in this episode, with his concealed identity, his secret agenda, and inner conflict between serving the humans and putting them in danger. He has a narratively very queer-coded character. And he's further presented as queer with his stiff, posh British accent. And let's not talk anymore about that waxy white liquid. The discovery of these elements of him both repulse and fascinate the crew. So I think for all these reasons, Ash has to be quite high on the list. And actually, I'm going to say I think he makes it into iconic diva territory, but he can't knock Frank off his top spot, so I'm going to put him there. Okay, so next we have Hal from 2001. And Hal's an interesting mix, to be honest. He's bodiless and faceless, which would suggest non-binary or at least gender ambiguity. However, he is given a male name, male voice, and a male character, and is represented as being both omnipotent and dangerous. Experiencing a malfunction, he starts to decline into erratic and irrational behaviour, displaying emotions such as jealousy and rage. He sings a song to comfort himself as he dies.
Daisy. Daisy, give me your answer too.
He's definitely queer-coded, though I would say less obviously than Ash for sure. His job is quite literally to spy on the men in his care, and he's an all-seeing eye. He witnesses many intimate moments, such as watching over the men in suspended animation, watching the awake astronauts jogging in short shorts around the centrifuge, watching their creativity, and watching their private conversations. He has a close relationship with these men despite being a computer. They are vulnerable with him, and he abuses this vulnerability, manipulating them into rescue and ultimately death. In summary, although subtle, there is queer coding for Hal, and although he's a bodiless machine and therefore inherently incapable of sexuality, he is characterised by many stereotypes of homosexual men. So, for these reasons, I think he falls into the partial slay category, falling further down than both Spock and Seven of Nine, who also both have plausible deniable queerness. Last but by no means least is Ava from Ex Machina. And on the surface of it, Ava is not a particularly queer-coded character. She is a stereotypical, sexualised female android created for male amusement and pleasure. She lives trapped in a world where females are created, displayed and used for their sexual and physical attributes. Her narrative, though, is one of queerness. She desires to escape and experience the wider world. She is not content to fit the expectations of the role she's been given, and she ultimately manipulates and kills to get what she wants. And her sexuality is a falsehood. Although her creator claims he has programmed her to be heterosexual, her romantic and sexual desire for Caleb is ultimately revealed to be an elaborate pretense by Ava, who demonstrates more self-awareness than she was intended to have. Her initial warm sensuality is shown to be a facade. Her actual identity is cold, calculating, and emotionless. So, for me, this is a really difficult one to judge, because had she been written as a male character with homosexual or even bisexual coding, I don't think her physicality would be quite so much a focus of the movie. Yet the whole point of her character is that she is an object of desire. She is designed to be a manipulator, and in the end, she manipulates even those who believe they control her. So the dichotomy of the sexualized focus on her physical qualities and her cold and unfeeling personality could be read as a metaphor for asexuality and aromanticism, though not an especially positive one. But there is no getting away from the fact that she is a character invented by male writers and made real by male characters, and is subjected to the male gaze of both audience and in-universe characters. Her rejection of her expected role is not portrayed as queer-coded subversion of stereotypes. Instead, her coldness is an inherent quality of her machine interior. She is quite literally unfeeling. But it's not that she is absent sexuality or romanticism. She just has no capability to even experience it. Her only desire is for self-preservation, for freedom, not for expression, acceptance, finding her purpose or herself, or overcoming a personal obstacle. There are a limited number of symbols of queerness attributed to her. The two most noticeable ones to me are her short pixie haircut at the beginning of the movie, which gives her an androgynous look, but this soon changes to become more traditionally feminine. And the other is the fact she uses Nathan's keycard to exit the building, encouraging a visual comparison between them by displaying his face as a passable visual identifier for her. I think we can consider Ava partially queer-coded, but not really. So I think for me, she is actually still in the closet. Probably further in there than E.T., because he was at least comfortable with some degree of fluidity. And there we go. So those are my Campermeter judgments for this episode. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And which other androids, robots and AIs would you want to place on the Campermeter? Drop me a comment below. Contact us on socials at Queer New Worlds on Blue Sky, Instagram and TikTok, or send us an email to queernewworldspod@gmail.com. Okay, so this has been quite an intense episode and we've covered a lot of ground. It got a bit serious in a few places, but I hope you still enjoyed the analysis and my musings on gender and robots. Before we wrap up, there's just time for the part of the show that is over to you in a segment we call Incoming Transmission. So in last week's episode, We're All Aliens Here, I asked you, what was your first or worst alien crush? And we did have a few responses, which I will share here. So first up, we have listener Wendy, who said they definitely had a crush on Yoda when they were young. He's so cute and talks funny. One listener asked, does Princess Leia count as an alien? And I mean, technically, she does, as she was born on an asteroid and lived on Alderaan, but she's still kind of human. This person also said, I don't know if crush is the right word, but I was always intrigued by Jem from the original Star Trek. Cy Snootles for worst crush, the lips and the voice, and you know what? I can see it. And listener Nay said an obvious one was Lilu from The Fifth Element. I think it was the fact she was just a bunch of opposites of the spectrum. Badass yet naive, innocent but deadly, selfless yet no sense of self. She was the focal point of a lot of things for all the wrong reasons, but who and what she was the true prize. The character was extremely relatable, which was really attractive. As this week's theme is around do robots have gender, the question I've got for you is, pick your favourite robot or AI from sci-fi, shows, movies, video games, whatever. The question is, how would changing its gender alter the impact that that character has on the plot, the other characters and the world they inhabit? Your ideas can be silly or serious, there are no rules. I should state that this isn't specifically a question or commentary on trans identities, although that would be a valid reason to choose for updating a robot's gender expression. This is more about exploring the stereotypes and subversions of gender roles, including genderless and genderqueer presentations. I'll share some of your submissions in a future episode. So email your thoughts to queernewworldspod@gmail.com, drop us a comment below, or reach out to us on socials at queernewworlds on TikTok, Instagram and Blue Sky. You can also visit our website queernewworlds.com. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's a new episode on YouTube and Spotify every Friday. In next week's episode, we'll be exploring the aesthetic of camp in space. From Flash Gordon to Thunderbirds and Doctor Who to Guardians of the Galaxy. And I want to know, who is your favourite campy sci-fi character and why? Until next week, live long and fabulous.